In 2017, the Doctor Who Christmas special was Stephen Moffat's Twice Upon a Time, a story which sees the 1st and 12th Doctors meeting as both are reluctant to regenerate for their own reasons. The episode was, okay, it was fine, but it kept doing this one thing that just rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, really, doesn't she?
Yeah, if you like, ladies made of glass.
Well, aren't all ladies made of glass, in a way?
During the episode, the First Doctor makes several overtly sexist comments, all played for laughs, meant to highlight and own up to, I guess, the sexist past and character of the show. But you see, here's the thing that really bothered me and other fans of the First Doctor. Stories starring the First Doctor do feature the occasional bit of casual sexism, as you might expect. For example, this scene, in which the Doctor takes Ian aside, disregards Barbara's concerns, and encourages Ian to do the same. But the First Doctor is not the caricature of sexism that appears in Twice Upon a Time. He's also not just a black and white version of the magical space wizard Doctor that we know today. No, the First Doctor is a very different and interesting character, motivated largely by self-interest, to the point that in the first serial, he literally tries to straight up kill a dude with a rock because he was getting in the Doctor's way. The special sabotages basically every interesting aspect of the First Doctor, so it can make the funnies about a character who, by Stephen Moffat's own portrayal, is from a planet that doesn't care about gender anyway, so how the hell the First Doctor even ended up with these overtly sexist attitudes, I don't understand. To me, this portrayal of the First Doctor brings to mind the live-action remakes of Disney movies, where they comment on sexist aspects of previous works in a fun way, but acknowledge little to nothing else because feminist princesses help to sell dolls. No, I'm not against these progressive, for want of a better words, things I'll be discussing today being in Doctor Who, like how I'm glad that Disney is acknowledging the existence of gay people, even if it only is in scenes that can be cut from foreign releases. I also don't think that Doctor Who shouldn't be political, because politics is just something that Doctor Who does. In fact, I wanted to make this video because this new era of Doctor Who takes things one step further. Chibnall's Who doesn't just obnoxiously shove in our face things which appeared more naturally in days gone by. Every point it makes is exaggerated and inconsistent to the point of farce. So, let's go through this point by point. My name is Kit, and this is not so much a video essay as it is a series of complaints, but it's still on brand, so we're going to go with it. To have this discussion, we first need to clarify and define two things. Firstly, I think that when talking about things like this, the death of the author is almost certain to come up to some extent, and while you're almost certainly familiar with this idea if you watch a lot of video essays, in essence, the death of the author argues against authorial intent as the best frame of analysis in favour of audience interpretation. In essence, what does it matter what the author intended when the audience can interpret the text in any number of ways? And I tell you, I love this shit. I'm all for audience interpretation. In fact, my videos kind of depend on it. But not only is there, I think, a place for authorial intent in analysis, but it's also sometimes undeniable that a story is about something. Some stories are about Amazon and treatment of employees. Some stories are about racism and bigotry. Some stories are about Donald Trump, but not really. Look, I'm just one guy, I can't understand everything. I would like to be very clear that my problem is not with Doctor Who telling stories about these things. It's about the deliveries of these stories being so inconsistent and mangled that if there is a message, we either have to guess what it is, or just sort of make tweets that announce to shrugging vaguely and gesturing in the direction of, it was bad, I guess. Second, if we're talking about Doctor Who being woke, what exactly do we mean by woke? Well, first of all, woke is kind of a catchy word for a title more than it is the most fitting word for this discussion, but okay, a simple Google search of woke reveals the definition alert to injustice, especially racism, and this here Urban Dictionary definition reads, the act of being very pretentious about how much you care about a social issue. And whatever you think of those definitions, I'd like you to keep them both in mind, especially this chestnut here. Okay, are we all on the same page? We all know the waters we're treading in? Great. That being the case, let's talk about how the Doctor helped the Nazis do Nazi stuff. We're going to start, how far through the video are we? With the most obvious example of the show being just super regressive, and with the only season 12 story that I'm going to discuss in detail today, because I super don't want to rewatch any of season 12. There's a lot that I could say about this episode. In particular, there's a lot that I would like to say about its portrayal of the Master, and how it built upon, or didn't, previous incarnations of the character, this incarnation of the Master befriends the Doctor while pretending to be human, and they sort of had a thing going, which makes this scene extra fun for the fanfic authors of the world. And I would assume that the Doctor, having as she does a history of punching racists, would be pretty sympathetic towards what the Master might go through as a person of colour living among these assholes, especially during her friendship with his human identity O. So at one point during part 2 of Spyfall, the Doctor finds herself in Nazi-occupied Paris while on the run from the Master, who, like he has before, finds her pretty much immediately, but because Chibnall decided to abandon the old tidbit about Time Lords being able to sense one another, finding the Doctor is extra complicated, so he has to go to great lengths. And the solution that Chibnall decided to actually put in the script is that the Master infiltrated the rank of the Nazis so that he has Nazi lackeys backing him up, which I don't... Okay, but seriously though? See, the first problem here is that pretending to be a Nazi is a lot of work, and ultimately doesn't seem to help him that much, or really need to be a thing at all, and the Doctor calls it low even for the Master, which I think is fair because both the Doctor and the Master have a core character which runs through every regeneration, and this doesn't seem like a thing that the Master would do. Not least because it was completely fucking unnecessary. But just overshadowing all of this is the fact that if your intentions aren't good and your framing isn't right, then having an Asian man dress up as a Nazi when you're a white man, Chris, is not in the best of taste. The Master has an obvious problem here, in that he's not actually a good fit for the Nazi brand, so he uses a perception filter to appear white. Seriously, Chris. What the fuck? So he can go hang out with his Nazi pals. The Doctor, agreeing to meet him on the Eiffel Tower, knows this, and that she still needs to get away from him. Her solution?
Facial perception filter. Very easy to jam. Now they'll see the real you. Good luck.
She uses her sonic screwdriver to break the Master's perception filter, which means that when the Nazis arrive and find the Master... Okay, do I even need to say what the problem is here? Do I need to explain what's so very fucky about this decision? Like, I'm still supposed to be rooting for the Doctor, right? I'm still meant to think that the Doctor is a good person? Because honestly, shit like this does a better job of making me think that the Doctor is an arsehole than the 12th Doctor's entire "wah, am I a good man" phase. This isn't even the only time that the Doctor's done something shitty that was treated as fine because she's the good guy. But it is probably the most reprehensible, and the thing that so far has bothered me the most. It's certainly the thing that sat with me the longest. It's also probably the least funny of the things I'd like to discuss today, but it is symptomatic of a problem that has plagued Chibnall's Who, that made the characters impossible to really connect to and made the stories forgettable at their best. So, since the Paris sequence does make me think that Chibnall neither understands how racism affects people, nor does he care to, let's talk a bit about how that sort of thing, that not caring, negatively affects his stories, and how the Doctor hates guns unless she doesn't. Or, who the fuck is the Doctor? I don't know, and neither does Chibnall. Doctor Who has a history of being anti-gun. After Nine's struggle with his trauma and the violent side that it brought out, the 10th Doctor was in a place where he struggled to trust anyone who carried a gun, to the point that he stopped trusting an organisation that was a huge part of Classic Who, because this organisation had a militaristic nature.
I see one more gun.
While Moffat was showrunner, there's no doubt that the show shifted in tone to be more friendly to an American audience. The premiere of season 6 in particular was very,
But now I've been to the most amazing place of all. Paris, France.
America, in fact.
And maybe that is something to do with the anti-gun stuff leaving the spotlight. I can't really say for sure, but I do know that the Doctor married a woman who used guns like a whole bunch. With the 13th Doctor, the anti-gun sentiment returns in force, sort of. Sometimes. The 13th Doctor is arguably the most pacifist Doctor of New Who. She's adamantly against violence, and guns in particular, as presented here in The Ghost Monument. Or rather, we're told that she's against guns. Told, not consistently shown. I have two specific examples in mind, both of which I think point to a larger problem. As I said, in The Ghost Monument, it's very clearly illustrated to us that the Doctor hates the guns and the shooting of people, but not the burning of aliens. In the next episode, Rosa, our antagonist is a time-travelling racist who's unable to physically harm people, but is able to shoot them with a fun gadget that sends them back in time, I think. The Doctor isn't super happy with this, as you can imagine, but she's not going to hurt or kill him, because the Doctor is against that, apparently. At the end of the episode, Ryan gets hold of this timey-wimey gun and shoots the bad guy, whose name I now realise I've totally forgotten, into prehistoric times. An act which, while not fatal in itself, will almost certainly lead to the dude's death. And while I understand that the Doctor wasn't there for this incident, it does seem weird that the show established the Doctor's hatred of guns and violence and then never did anything with this scene. It is worth noting that Chibnall was one of 2 writers on this episode, and it's impossible to say what was Blackman and what was Chibnall, but for reasons that are, shown throughout this entire video, the gun but not gun scene has some real fingerprints on it. I'm watching you, Chris. In Arachnids in the UK, we have this character who's sort of Trump, but not Trump at all.
Please don't mention that name.
Which doesn't flow well with the rest of the episode or really add to the commentary about, dumping waste and corporations being shitty, which Doctor Who has already done better. Anyway, he runs in all super jazzed to shoot the Spider-Mum, and the Doctor's like, no, don't shoot the Spider-Mum, and not Trump is like, lol, okay, bye, and just fucking leaves. Which sucks, and it's such a Chibnall move. But the point is that the Doctor hates guns, hates killing, even when the creature in question is seriously suffering and in a huge amount of pain. Luckily the spider doesn't last much longer, or that would have bordered on torture. Just another thing that the 9th Doctor has over the 13th, I guess. And the Doctor's stance in this episode makes even less sense than that. To deal with the spider kids, the Doctor and co lure the spiders into, a safe room vault thingy, and while they're in there, the Doctor says no to arming the team with all the weapons in there because guns bad. What the Doctor suggests is to let them die naturally. It's established that there's 6 months of food in there, but we can only assume that that can sustain the spiders. The Doctor is advocating for letting the spiders starve to death, or grow until their size kills them, like happened to their mother. How is that better? How is that in any way better? They're portrayed as animals, which I certainly don't like to see suffer. Do you like to see animals suffer, Chibnall? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Actually, that reminds me, in the season finale, Graham and Ryan are all gung-ho to kill Tim Shaw. That's not his name, that's a bad joke that's bad. This is understandable because Tim Shaw killed Graham's wife, Ryan's grandmother. The Doctors taught them the great, good moral lesson that guns are bad though, so instead they suspend him in life for all of eternity.
Left to rot? How completely obscene.
That's worse. That is worse. That is something the Doctor has historically done in his darkest moments. Do you remember that, Chris? Do you remember character nuance? Now, I'm totally cool, more than cool, with the show making points and telling stories in favour of gun control, but the show's portrayal and handling of violence is extremely inconsistent. It essentially amounts to shooting is bad unless you're friends with a doctor, and the Doctor is kind of a shitty person, but that's okay. Basically, we're in a situation where the good guys are the good guys because the writer says so, and the bad guys are the bad guys because the writer says so, and it has nothing to do with the character's actions, and the quote-unquote good guys can be pretty much evil with no consequence. I don't think you can, with any skill, put a message into your story if that message is mangled by a nonsensical disconnect between what the characters are telling us is right and wrong and what you are showing us with the characters' actions. It speaks to a real lack of, thought to say, don't do drugs, kids, but then make it okay if the good guys do drugs because they just have hearts of gold. You can't be simultaneously aware of social issues, but unaware of who the actual fuck your characters are, especially when your messages are so blatant. And while we're on the subject, reflection necessitates growth, and these characters are stagnant. One of the recurring criticism of Chibnall's episodes is the problem of the crowded TARDIS. With 3 companions to juggle, the stories don't end up having enough time to develop any of the characters beyond the surface level. In fact, this is a problem that plagued classic Who in the era of Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, and is a large part of the reason that it became typical to travel with one female companion. So far, New Who has done a pretty good job of having more than one companion. Mickey, for example, only travelled in the TARDIS in a few episodes, and he'd been developed a lot before that, which gave him, Rose, and even Jackie time to develop separately. And by the time Rory became a full-time companion, we did have plenty of time with Amy as a singular companion, and the development shifted when the 2 of them travelled together. River not being there in every episode was also a huge help. So the Chibnall episodes were criticised a lot because 4 whole companions were dropped into the first episode, 3 of whom survived, allowing no time to develop any of them, or the Doctor. I'd say the most interesting companion is probably Graham. I think he's the most interesting reason for travelling with the Doctor, at least, and in Rosa, there's arguably a more interesting tie with Graham being a bus driver than there is the characters of Colour's response to the racist environment. And that's the sticking point here. In an episode all about racism and race relations, the two people of colour in the Doctor's crew don't really grow from the experience in any meaningful way. There's the first confrontation and several scenes which show Ryan and Yaz interacting with this new environment, but they ultimately get one real conversation in which to reflect on how racism affects them in their everyday lives, which is, Doctor Who didn't focus really on issues of race and how they might affect the companions until the 12th Doctor season. And choosing to focus on it is cool, great, but they don't really do anything with the discussion in a way that meaningfully develops the characters. Fiction reflects the real world, and can be used to tell stories about real-world issues in a way that Doctor Who really seems to want to be doing here. But the thing is that fiction is not actually real life, and doesn't work like it. Fiction has to have a plot and character development in order to be meaningful. In other words, I don't think it's enough to point at racism and go, this is a thing that exists and is bad. The story also has to, affect the characters in any way. Neither Ryan or Yaz seems different for having met Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King. How this ties into the whole, overarching thing that I'm getting at here is that the characters are as horribly mishandled as the plots through which they journey. And this, like all the gun stuff I talked about, has a detrimental effects on all the messages accompanying episodes. Rosa has a pretty bad antagonist in the form of this racist greaser from the future whose name, again, I forgot and don't care to Google, but what I'd like to use as an example is whatever the fuck happened in Kablam. So Kablam starts with the Doctor getting an Amazon delivery that she ordered forever ago because she doesn't have Prime, I guess, and inside she finds a cry for help, so off she and her pals go to the Amazon space warehouse, where they get jobs to infiltrate the place and see if there's any nefarious goings-on. Even though the place is called Kablam, I'm calling it Amazon because it's basically Amazon and intended to be. It's got this whole thing going on about the conditions the employees have to work in and the quotas they have to meet, but more than that, the episode leans very heavily on how the whole place is run by robots, like those creepy guys who watch the humans and make sure they keep working and such, and there's a quota that the company has to meet of 10% human staff. So it's like, okay, is this episode about exploiting workers? Is it about jobs being affected by automation? The cry for help implied the former, but the quota regarding how many human employees there have to be implies the latter. And it can be about both. It can absolutely be about both, but making a story about multiple connected issues can work really well, but it requires a balancing act and a strong payoff that I don't think Chibnall's done, at all. And the climax payoff thing in Kablam is that it turns out actually Amazon itself, with the robots in there, was the one asking for help, I think, and the bad guy is just this one employee dude who's super mad about, again, I'd have to Google it, and he's rigged up a bunch of Amazon robots to explode and kill customers, so the Doctor just blows him up and doesn't feel bad about it. The same woman who wouldn't even allow guns to put creatures out of their misery is just fine with blowing up this guy. And then the big corporate boss people are like, oh yeah, we're gonna hire more humans now and not mistreat them, and the Doctor just sort of believes them and leaves. What did the characters learn from this experience? What did any of us learn from this experience? Because it feels like the show was trying to tell me that actually mistreated employees are the bad guys and corporations will behave themselves if we just ask them nicely, which that's not how any of that works. But is the message also that too much machine automation is bad? Because that seems super unfair on the machines who were the ones getting blown up, along with this girl who we apparently forgot about or something, and also the robots were the ones who asked for help in the first place and we just blew them up and fired them. Like I said, you can read into a story whatever feels right to you. Stories like this one seem like they're meant to have a message, and while I think I know what the message is supposed to be, by way of the script being just terrible, it's also not that at all. I know this show is trying to say something about social issues, but all it really does is point to a social issue and then flounder for the length of an episode. It reminds me of comedies that point to where jokes could be instead of actually making them. It leaves the experience feeling hollow. Understanding societal issues in any meaningful way really requires you to have something real to say about them. Otherwise you just come off like you have ulterior motives for bringing up the topic at all, like you don't really care. And what is really getting to me is that what the show says seems disingenuous when you actually look at what the characters are doing. They are the vessels through which messages are delivered, and it's a problem when what we see them do is really not okay. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I think it's great that there's two people of colour in the main gang, even though the crowded TARDIS problem has plagued the series. I love that Time Lords just sort of say fuck you to gender norms, and I swear if I see one more person on Twitter complain about the mere fact that Joe Martin is in the show, but All that aside, I don't think that Doctor Who is being in any way progressive by paying lip service to societal problems and then having a woman who hates guns blow someone up. That is not a reflection on the shitty things that humans do. That is not growth. This is just not demonstrative of an understanding of the aspects of society upon which the show is commenting. This is nonsense. And while nonsense has its place, in the past even the silliest episodes of Doctor Who had something to say hidden in all that, well, nonsense. Doctor Who can say things that are important, and it has done a lot, but it can't when all this mangled bullshit gets in the way of the message, or stops the message from being shared at all. It gets to me, like, on a personal level, that this seems to be Chibnall's vision of what Doctor Who can do, and that this seems to be his vision of the Doctor. Thank you very much for watching this video about Doctor Who. One of the things I thought I could comment on was the fact that Ryan is initially only disabled when it's convenient and then isn't disabled at all. But my good friend over at littleseabear.com has written an excellent article on just that topic, so instead of hearing me rant on for even longer, go ahead and click that link in the description to read the excellent post that my friend wrote. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.